Hey folks, this is Brian with my review of the Runequest role-playing Glorantha manuscript. This is actually an addendum. You've noticed past couple of videos about some of my confusion on the level of power and use of rune magic between the various levels of worshippers. So I went through last night and I wrote down everything for initiates, rune priests, god talkers, and rune lords. So I can make a side-by-side comparison, try and figure out, what's the book really saying, and then my own interpretation of it. So we will not talk about lay members because they don't have any rune magic. And for the god talkers, their rune magic is just like priests, so we won't need to talk about that either. So the differentiations we're going to look at is the initiate, the rune priest, and the rune lord. And the initiate, that's the first time you sacrifice power to your deity. That establishes that connection that gives you access to all the general rune magic spells, which we talked about earlier. Have to deal with the cult, spells, and things are just so common. Everybody has like find enemy and heal. Okay, no real issues with that, except in the book it talks about that first point how you sacrifice. You also, well, I don't have an issue with you also get a rune point. You get a rune point with that one because that's your sacrifice for. But it also says you get access to cult rune spells. So that 1 point of power you sacrifice gives you access to all of the general spells plus one cult special rune spell. And that I do have an issue with. I think that 1 point in those 10 general spells is pretty fair. But then we get into the rune points and the rune spells. Now in the book, or the manuscript, it specifically says sacrifice. You can sacrifice a rune point to use a rune spell. To me, that sounds like one use. You sacrifice it, it's gone. And that ties in with Runequest 2 fairly well with the whole sacrifice for one use rune spells. But later on, it also says you can that an initiate can replenish their spent rune points, but they haven't spent any rune points. They have sacrificed their rune points, and words mean things. Okay, and they also you get power gain rolls. You do that by helping with holy days and sacred time ceremonies, because initiates help with stuff. They don't run anything, right? So that's where I have a couple of issues with this on the initial level. Okay, if we go to a rune priest needs to have 5 current rune points, and I said current because it's my interpretation, because I'm looking at doing this whole sacrifice thing and for one use for initiates. So 5 rune points in the power of 18, right? And that talks about being able to replenish your rune points by leading and performing sacrifices on holy days and sacred time for your temple, right? But also that you can get all of your rune points back with a successful worship skill roll at a temple or holy place. And I'm assuming that's actually doing a ceremony. It would make sense to me. And that's good. No issues there at all. That makes sense to me. Now the Rune Lord does not need to have any rune points. He'll obviously have 1 because he has to be an initiate, so he's got that 1 with access to the common spells. But he is not required to have any more rune points. And with 5 for rune priest, it used to be you have to sacrifice 10 previously to be a rune priest, but now it's just down to 5. And I don't remember there being any need for power sacrifices for rune magic for Rune Lord in Runequest 2. And there's not for Runequest Glorantha. It's just, skills and stuff. But again, the Rune Lord, like a rune priest, can replenish his rune points by leading at holy days and performing other sacrifices. But under the Rune Lord, it doesn't say anything about replenishing all of your rune points with a successful worship skill roll. Now it's kind of interesting because, and we'll get into this in the next video when we're talking more about finishing up all the cult stuff, is that there are only a very few, I think it's like three cults that have both rune priests and rune lords. So you either got a rune priest or you have a rune lord. In general, you have one or the other. That's, running your ceremonies and stuff like that. So I can see a rune priest being, the magic user type, be able to replenish all of this by doing the successful worship skill rolls. But if you're in a cult that doesn't have any priests, your rune lords are running the worship, the worship ceremonies, and so they should be making worship skill rolls too. So there's some confusion there. And again, I've talked before about this whole power elevation thing for rune lords and priests not being equal anymore. So I'm not sure. The way I'm looking at running it currently is initiates do the initial sacrifice power, get 1 rune point, access to all of the common rune spells. But if they use that rune point, it goes away. Do they still have access to those spells? Well, yeah, they still have access. They just don't have power to run, to actually cast any. They have to sacrifice more power to get more rune points. That's how I'm thinking of running it. And if you get to the point where your power's up to 18, you've got all the other requirements for rune priest, assuming your cult has rune priests, and you've stored up, you still have 5 that you haven't used, then they become reusable or renewable or replenishable, as it says. And then I'm looking at the differentiation between rune lords and rune priests with that whole worship skill roll thing. Priests can get their rune points back more easily than rune lords. That's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. We'll see, because after I finish up with this cults piece, the one after that is rune magic. And so hopefully we'll get some clarification on all that from there. But so that's it. Problem word: sacrifice. For sacrificing rune points for access to a spell. That kind of one of those things that going, that means something to me. What does it mean to you? Let me know. Ciao.